MHO Talk Show. IMHO Talk Show.
We are back.
You know what it is, Sir Charles.
Miss Max.
Razor.
Go ahead and pop a squat, Razor. Get comfortable.
I'm on my feet for this one.
Man, because IMHO fam, you know how we do. We do it for the people. And so we're living in a time right now, say what you will about it. I think I don't even need to elaborate on that, Max. I think the people know exactly what I'm referring to. We as a country and we as a people are living in some times that I'd venture to say that we maybe never have seen, like to this extent and the way that it's made up. But the thing about that, though, is this is not our adversity, right? Like this is not our first time facing adversity. Like we know how to be resilient. We know how to overcome. That's one thing. That's one thing that's ingrained in us as a people. But I heard somebody say, wow, why do we always got to fight? Like why are we fighting everybody's fight? And then people kind of hijack our movements and you get new groups, and whether special interests, minority groups, whatever the case is. But Black people are always in the mix, in the middle, and are benefiting the greater society, right? For all. And so we have a young man with us right now that is holding up the banner of none other than the NAACP. I'm talking about a brother and friend of mine, Mr. Talik Chambers. He is the state of Virginia youth and college president. Is that correct?
Sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Yes, sir. And it's awesome to have you, brother. Good afternoon.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Welcome.
Yes, indeed. And man, of course, I said it. I wanted to start it that way because I know a lot of things are heavy on a lot of people's minds right now and in our spirits. And we're facing real pressures. And people are talking about like who is together, who is unified, right? Like we're still thinking about, does voting matters? Like, do we still have a democracy to even go vote for anymore? Right. I mean, these are serious questions. And I know a brother such as yourself, and what's been consistent with NAACP is the importance of voting. They've been, critical in making sure that we have our voting rights and things of that sort. So, and before I kick it to you to kind of further introduce the work that you do, and we can dig deeper into what the National Association for Colored People is about and doing now. I definitely want to say, me as a person, I've been delighted, right, for any qualms that I've had on how the organization may have operated over time. Right now, in this moment, I feel like it's stepping up, and so I want to, I definitely want to, say thank you to leaders such as yourself and others there, because there was a time, man, like to where if you would turn on a social media page or website or want people to be outspoken from NAACP, it didn't happen, or at least I didn't see it. It was like, we're gonna do our Dr. King program here, and we're gonna be quiet most of the year. You know what I mean? But the president, the current president,
contest,
right? But the current president, and don't get me wrong, I love my elders and respect my elders. Please don't get me wrong, but the evolution didn't quite keep up through every generation. I think it's fair to say. But right now, man, Max, I don't know if you follow. You can go on the NAACP Instagram page. Brother President is speaking out and is not ashamed.
Good for you.
Is not ashamed. I ain't talking about him right now. I'm talking about the national president. So Talik does his thing too. But the national president, I feel like, is representing it at a level that's never seen. But I feel like he is appointed for times such as these. Right. So Talik, I think I've kind of introduced it enough. Pitched it enough, but you are here, brother. Let our listeners know, what brings you here today, who you're representing.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank y'all for having me. My name is Talik Chambers. I am a native of Buckingham County, Virginia, and I proudly serve as the Youth and College State President for the NAACP Virginia State Conference. I've been a part of this organization for half of my life, since I was 12 years old, being a part of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People's Youth and College Division, and have just seen how this organization has not only impacted myself, but my peers. And as you laid out, like so expertly, Charles, like we are in a time period where activism, mobilization, and more importantly, information is being attacked. And I know, being a part of this organization, being a part of the oldest civil rights organization in this nation, founded in 1909, that the NAACP has always stood at the forefront of protecting liberties, protecting rights, but more importantly, protecting the access to information and knowledge. So I'm here today just to talk a little about my organization, and hopefully inspire listeners and those out there to get more involved with the organization as a whole, specifically if you are in the Central Virginia area.
Tell us why you got involved with the NAACP at the age of 12.
Yeah, so that I have to give all credit to my family, specifically my great grandmother and my great aunt. Because growing up in Buckingham, for those of you all who may not know, Buckingham is the birthplace of Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history. And I knew that, I feel like, before I could walk, because that was something that my great grandmother like instilled in all of us. Again, she was born in 1939. She had like a 5th grade education, but she knew the importance of education and, more importantly, the importance of knowing our history. And for those of you all who also may not know, the Buckingham County branch of the NAACP has had a long history of being civically engaged and academically engaged when it comes to fighting against things like desegregation. So I come from a community that upholds activism, that upholds community organizing. So again, at 12, it was just like, hey, you joining the youth council, like your membership, your dues is paid, your membership is paid. The meetings are every Wednesday night.
You a member.
You a member. And I'm like, okay, this is just another like after school activity at the age of 12. But as I, got more involved, took on leadership opportunities in my youth council, I learned like why they were so heavily pushing that, because it was the fact that not only am I getting access to such great leaders, civil rights leaders, politicians, like what have you, but I'm also learning how to mobilize, what activism looks like from the ground, right? How to really engage with grassroots organizing, how to build coalition. Like these are things I'm learning as a teenager.
Right.
So by the time that I graduated and went to the University of Virginia, I was like, okay, where the NAACP at? Like I'm ready. And then it was like, oh, it's not an NAACP. Like we're not active. And I was like, oh, we got to fix that. So I literally, as soon as I got to UVA, my second year, like reactivated the University of Virginia's chapter. But again, I have to give all credit to my community. Shout out to the Buckingham Youth Council and Buckingham Branch for really instilling the importance of, utilizing our voices to make a difference and fight for the rights of others.
That's a beautiful thing, man. And look, I don't want to overlook that either, because, coming from a place like Madison County myself, for you to just make that little leap, if you say Buckingham and I went to UVA, like, bro, like, I know you don't need any more pats on the back, but I'm gonna tell you, man, like, you are definitely an inspiration, because being a leader from a young age, and then when you to make it to the UVA, which, needless to say, is not an easy feat for for a lot of people, not to mention being a Black man from a rural county like Buckingham, but for just anybody in general, people will be scraping and clawing to get into UVA, right? And you are a leader in many facets. I know we had to talk about NAACP today, but I definitely want to give you your flowers, though, to make people know, like, you're a young man in your 20s and doing the thing, for real.
I appreciate that.
Yes, indeed, man. Something that you said that stands out to me that I want you to elaborate on, like you mentioned that even at a young age, you noticed times to where NAACP didn't seem present, right? So like, let's address that a little bit about how you sort of fixed that, sort of overcame that, in regards to trying to get youth membership nowadays. Sort of what you impart from your own experiences.
And I think first and foremost, I think one of the key things that kind of feeds into that is this narrative or this belief that like the NAACP is your grandmother's organization or your grandpa's organization. It's the folks that marched with Martin across the at Edmund Pettus Bridge, right? It's the folks that were at the Million Man March. It's the folks that sat at the the counters, right? It's very much a 60s organization. And afterwards, what what is the relevance?
Can I just say the acronym just sounds old?
Right. No, and it does.
No disrespect.
No, and it does. And I think that leads to it, right? I mean, there's tidbits everywhere. But I think for me, one of the ways that I recognized that was because I had the opportunity to really be around like young people, like my peers in the organization as well. And I think that it is all about your specific access, you know? And I think I've been blessed to have access to, you know, some of those like great leaders when we talk about, you know, those who we read in history books, the John Lewis's, the Julian Bonds and, you know, activists that are notable, right? Being able to say that like, hey, I remember when I was a teenager and John Lewis came and spoke during a national convention, or I remember when we had, you know, former like foot soldiers come and talk to us within youth and college to inspire us to kind of keep the fight going because they were also kids themselves, right? So I think always rooting myself in the recognition that the NAACP has always been a multi-generational organization, and being frank, the core of the organization has always been youth activism. Because when we talk about the civil rights era, even going so far as even an MLK, right? He wasn't 60, 70, 80 years old when he was leading marches and giving speeches, right?
That's right.
And that all impacts or influences me to make sure that I, as a person who's a product of this organization, right, inform folks of those things, right? I've been able to speak, you know, at the Supreme Court, in front of Congress, like all of these opportunities that folks like dream of having because of the work that I put into, you know, serving my community and being a part of this organization. So I think that, you know, your grandma or grandpa's organization, I think it can be very localized depending on like your branch and like the dynamic between the branch and the community. But I think when we remember that this organization is a national organization, and not to brag on the Virginia State Conference, but look, when it comes to submitting like lawsuits and putting pen to paper legally and putting boots on the ground when it comes to civic engagement, like ain't nobody topping the Virginia State Conference. That's adult and youth and college. So, you know, as a product of that, I always kind of lead with that to inform folks that like, hey, if you feel like your branch is getting a little bit of age, maybe you can be the voice to try to come in and bring more people in, because kids don't know what they don't know. So if there isn't an environment where they're being fostered and informed and developed, and to know that there's a place for them in this organization, then they're not. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be here today with you guys.
Appreciate that. So the question is still the why. Like I can imagine people listening and the resounding question in people's heads is still the why. Fact of the matter is, when we think about, you know, the legacy and the long-standingness of the NAACP, like of course that, you know, like that gets applauded, rightfully so. But when you see so many other movements through the years, and generationally, they all will say, no, like we were made for a time such as now. We address modern day problems. What is your why when you're convincing a young Black person to give of their time, membership dues, whatever, to the NAACP? Absolutely.
And I think in those type of situations, I always start with just asking them like, well, what is happening in your community? Like what are the issues that you see in your community, and what are solutions that you would like to see?
Do they have an answer to that question?
And some of them do and some of them don't, right? And so those that don't, I always say like, hey, like before we jump into any involvement in any organization that deals in community engagement or activism, like you have to be in tune with what's happening in your community. But like I talked with some folks locally or some kids locally here in Charlottesville, and they're like, here are the issues. Like they laid it out like point A to point Z. And I'm like, okay, well, y'all like there's a way that these things can be addressed. And they're like, well, how? And I'm like, y'all, like these are things that the NAACP does. So again, I think a lot of it is rooted in a lack of information. Like you don't know what you don't know. But I do think I always lead, because again, I like to consider myself a very humble person. But I always lead with, again, my own story and how, again, when there were issues in Buckingham, when it came to teachers or discrimination or things of that nature, how being a part of the NAACP allowed me the accessing the resources to be able to mobilize. Okay, we need to go to the school board first. School
Yeah.
board, we need to go. And then if the school board doesn't work, then we reach out to our branch, and the branch contacts the state. Like, knowing that process to know that, hey, my concerns and my problems aren't falling on deaf ears.
I think that's the number one thing. If I may, can I interject there?
Good.
I think that's the number one thing. Like, at least in my time, because I've been in different like positions within the NAACP as well.
Yeah.
Like, you know, right now I'm general member. I have, you know, even a membership for family for my kids.
Right.
So family membership even includes my kids, but I'm not in any particular position right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been, and I would say that my number one qualm through that time, and I think something that did it a disservice some years ago, was that when you had groups such as Black Lives Matter and stuff like that coming up, it felt like that where NAACP used to be the one that the community would go to for like a human rights violation, and then NAACP would run it up through the legal redress, right? Some chapters, some chapters, especially in this area, weren't responsive. And so that kind of put a black eye on the organization as a whole, because they're like, but I thought this group was the one that when issues rise in our community, y'all are making sure that we have the proper legal redress and protocol to help our people when they have like a civic or civil issue, right? You know, like with the system power that be, you know, like, so I feel like that kind of did a thing. So is that still a priority for the NAACP, like to be, you know, an advocate for people of color when they're faced with the civil rights issue?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. That's a core foundation in the NAACP, our mission and our vision. And I think what you're speaking towards, right, is kind of the I like to call it the dissemination when it comes to the organization and all of its qualms and issues when it gets down to like the local branch or unit level, right? Because you also have folks, as I mentioned earlier, right, who've been president of a branch or president of a unit since 1965. And then it's like, hey, y'all are a little old. Y'all you can't move. And with all of the respect, look, as state conference president, I do. Yeah, you know? I have to. And it's like, I think for a lot of people who are accustomed to being in positions, it becomes a thing where it's like, hey, we appreciate you for your time and your service and your dedication. Like, even for myself, like, I'm about to age out of youth and college. I'm getting a little old. I'm about to be 25. So like, my term as youth and college president will be up in October. And instead of cleaving to that, or like, oh, like, I've had this position, I've done so much, I'm excited to see what the folks after me, you know, the youth that are coming up after me are going to contribute and build on the foundation that I've set. So I think with that, you know, your point, it comes a point where we also have to recognize that folks have to sometimes transition out of, you know, being the person in the front, being the person that's on the stage, leading the marches, to a person who mentors, who guides, who provides that additional resource for those that are coming up after. Because that's always also been a core aspect of the organization as well.
And it's also, as far as bringing in, you know, new blood, kind of fresh fire into the organization, something else that I think that the NAACP has to work around is a culture where activism, that's more attractive is that where you're in the streets and you're raising voices, you're pounding on tables, you know, outright insulting people, standing on, you know, what that is what I feel like this generation more so kind of cleaves to. And what is maybe you can speak on it, the NAACP's position on that? Is there space for both things? Do you think that you need your work and this counter work as well?
Yeah, I will say, I think for me as a member of the youth in college, one thing that we always like to say, right, is that we have a process, right? We litigate, we educate, we agitate. And I think that in this current era, in this current age that we live in, folks get really cleaved to that agitation piece. And I'm gonna quote one of my peers from Maryland, who's a former youth in college state president. He would always say that, like, a lot of the issues with our generation is that folks like to be Monday Night Football like players when it comes to activism. Like, you want the social media posts, you want the fists raised, you want the, you know, Black Panther fit, you want to be marching in the streets, you want to be yelling, like you said, slamming the table on the, but how is it moving the needle forward?
Yeah, that's
like
a good
you have to
question.
know and be mindful and educated as to what the problem is, who needs to be addressed, and create a pathway to getting it resolved, right? Because those things look good. Like it gets people informed, and agitation is definitely a part of what we do as an organization. But we also understand that, like, if the agitation is just for the sake of agitating, and we know that agitation is going to lead into certain narratives, right? We also are like, okay, if we're going to do a march, let's make sure that all of our legal stuff is in place. Our general counsel is informed, because if this go left, or they call the police, or they start arresting people, we got lawyers that are going to be bailing us out, and we're going to be on and like white on rice, right? Like, so, you know, I think that aspect is also because, as you mentioned earlier, there's so many organizations that pop up, and it feels like activism is something that, like, I want to be an activist today, right? But it's like there's education, you have to be informed as to what these issues are, and also understand the legacy and the history. And I think that's an asset that the NAACP has, is that we have access to that legacy and that knowledge, so that way we maneuver a little bit different.
Yeah, that's the part that I feel like a lot of people need to evaluate, is whether or not that form of activism is actually changing anything, or does it just become noise? Yeah. Because the same way that we kind of evolve in our strategies of approaching certain issues, those that actually have the power to make those decisions, they, you know, evolve as well. And they learn to just tune it out, because it will be over momentarily, you know? And at the end of the day, you've done nothing but make some noise for a short period of time.
Like, you can't yell all the time.
Right.
So I think that's another thing too. They expect that, and then they're just like, we're just gonna wait them out. Yeah. We're just gonna wait them out. But then we move nowhere forward. Versus if we're also educating, doing town halls, informing our masses. Yes. If we're also litigating, right? Yes. There's legal things there too. They can drown out the noise, but then there's other things that are coming out of them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. So we're gonna take a little break, Talik. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna dig a little deeper into how it systematically plays a role now too, because as we said at the beginning, we're facing, you know, some perilous times, some troubling times, and so what's that connection as we go into this election season, and the role NAACP is going to play within our government infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. And I'm sure that's going to bring about some razor questions as well. So, so we're going to get right back to it. Stay tuned, friends. We're going to take this quick water break. Tell your friends, family to tune in. We have Talik Chambers, president of the Virginia State Youth and College Division. And we're going to keep up the good work after this. To the ISM, H to the Izzo talk show, back like we never left. Sir Charles.
Max.
Raisin.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And we are here with none other than good brother Talik Chambers. He is representing the Virginia NAACP State Youth and College Division, where he serves as their president. And once again, congrats on all your accomplishments, young brother. Keep it going.
You, sir. Appreciate it.
You seem like one of them brothers that live to make the ancestors proud.
And I love it. And I appreciate that. That is a personal goal of mine. So I appreciate that.
Good stuff. So, so the first half, we kind of reintroduce the NAACP to folks, and and what it's about as it pertains to the advocacy and representation and whatnot. But we want to shift a little bit now, and talk more about its activity that's planned and its representation going into this election season, right? Because we have a lot on the line, right? Socially, and I know voting has always been a big thing when it comes to NAACP. But as with everything, And actually, I want Razor to actually ask the first official question.
Oh, Lord,
I want to ask the first official. You know, Max,
we was doing.
I heard you at the beginning of the show, Max. You said everybody gets a voice, even Razor.
Look, you didn't hear that. I'm pretty sure you wasn't even in the room.
But in all seriousness, though, it's like, you know, people always point to, okay, but when times get hard, who really got the gall to stand up against, dare I say, the evil that's in the world and not be bought out?
That's it.
Let's be 100, right? We're gonna keep it 100. You know, yeah. So that's how I want to set up. But Razor, what question or comment do you have?
Yes, sir. This has been an excellent interview.
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
very proud of, you know, the way that y'all displayed everything.
Appreciate
I got to give it to you. Now, let me tell you why I don't like the NAACP. Why I don't support it.
All right.
All jokes aside, man, there was a time frame where what I saw was, because we didn't have the membership numbers from our people, we had to turn to the government and the state organizations to be able to have the money to operate. So then when our people would get in trouble and need advocacy, and a lot of the people that it seemed, especially in the rural areas that they put in charge of the NAACP, were the preachers, the black preachers.
Yeah.
And they would not show up for you because it was attached to their pocket, you know, is what I saw. Right. The second reason that
church, maybe.
Or
the church.
Yeah. Black preachers too. Right. But the second reason was, I don't like the fact of we were called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and we were doing black things. We were showing up for black people, whether Black Panther, everything else, right? But when it came time to disperse money, as long as you had any type of tint to your skin, a percentage, we were giving people money. But anytime that we had to fight, we were out there by ourselves. Or if anybody else had a issue, they ran for us to stand next to them. But I couldn't find one organization, one group of people that stood next to black people against black people issues. And they will always tag NAACP up to the top of it. So then I felt like we were scapegoats and just little smiling monkeys out there, you know, and that's, you know, and I'm hoping with the things that you say that things change. But as of this point in time, I still feel the same way, that it is no more than a figurehead to get us to stand up there and help everybody else advance instead of black people, not colored people.
Yeah. My bad.
Do y'all have a debate?
Yeah. So being honest, as youth, that conversation, like those type of conversations comes out a lot. Even recently, I'm forgetting, I want to say maybe 5 years ago, that conversation or a similar conversation about making sure that in this organization, because starting off, the NAACP has always been a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-generational organization since its founding in 1909. So the reason why when we talk about like colored people as well as other minorities is because that has always been the founding.
So they ain't never lied to you, Rayson.
However, as young people, we were like, wait a minute. When we talk about the advances that this organization has made, yes, it has impacted a plethora of other groups of people. However, fundamentally, right, African Americans and people of African descent or black people have been at the forefront. So it was a push not only by other youth members like myself, but throughout the organization to make sure that when we talk about our mission and our vision, that we specifically identify the fact that black people and other people of color, right? So that has had a direct impact on our mission and
Let
how
me slide up here next to you. Now, to my understanding, the NAACP was created off the Nigerian movement, right?
The Niagara movement.
The Niagara movement,
yes,
right?
Sir.
And what was that based off of?
The Niagara movement was based off of a conglomerate of
predominantly. Let him finish talking first, but you over here cheerleading.
No, predominantly black scholars, right, who got together because they felt the need to create and have conversations around the attacks on African Americans that was happening throughout the nation.
Right.
So, and I speak very, very directly about that because, again, many of the members of the Niagara movement later on became founding members of the NAACP, but not all members of the Niagara movement became members of the NAACP. Okay. And I think to your point, right, the Niagara movement had a very specific intention when it comes to advocation directly towards African Americans. However, because the organization, the founders looked at, in order for us to advance as Black people, we need a multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multi-racial conglomeration, because there are certain access to certain things that as African Americans or people of African descent in this nation, we're not going to be able to do. However, we got white folks on our team. We got people of other ethnicities on our team. They have certain access that we do not. But
the access, wasn't that just Jewish people that was a part of the founding group? I'm not saying nothing against Jews or Jewish.
There are Jewish people, and there are some non-Jewish,
but they were the founders, though.
We consider them all as founders.
Right. Yes. So the way it looked from me looking, because I wasn't back there, is that the people that wanted to keep it Black, like the Pan-Africanism type of Marcus Garvey mindset, were pushed out so that others could come in and facilitate and still control us the way that they wanted to. That's the way it viewed to me. That doesn't make it true. But that's just what I saw.
And I'll use one of the Niagara movement founders, Monroe Trotter, who's connected to Central Virginia, as well as W.E.B. Du Bois, right? I think when we have conversations around like those type of activists, right, who are heavily like their work is directly linked to African Americans. But I think when it comes to the early stages of the NAACP, like we also have to discuss how personalities and like things can appear as if it's on a national level or like a institutional level, but in reality, I'm not really getting along with you, or we disagree on a personal level. And I think fundamentally getting to the root of a lot of the conversation that you brought up, but also you, Charles, as well, a lot of these things not necessarily have to do directly with the structure of the organization, but who is the face and who is the representation of said organization, right?
But is it okay for us to say that we weren't strong enough to do it as solely Black people, so we had to bring in other people to help facilitate the mission?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I wouldn't see that as we weren't strong enough. I would see it as building coalition amongst people with a common goal. Because if we even looked at the civil rights movement, right? That was technically a multiracial, multi-ethnic conglomeration of different organizations and people.
I don't know if I'm with that either,
that included not just African Americans or people in NAACP, but also preachers who were white, Black, and other ethnicities as well. So I think when we talk about coalition and moving the needle forward, I'm always gonna be pro-Black in the sense of making sure that our Black leaders always get their flowers. But even looking at someone like a MLK or a W.E.B. Du Bois or even a Malcolm X, if you want to even be a spectrum when it comes to it, there is an understanding that if folks are committed to the end goal of making sure that we end race-based discrimination, and we know that directly impacts Black Americans and people of African descent, and you are willing to be a part of that coalition and a part of that fight, it's not necessarily seen as we need you or you come in. It's seen as, okay, we're working for this common goal.
What I see, and then I'm gonna let Charles and Max take over this part right here, is when we have what is, as you describe, as everybody coming to us and we fighting for racism. If you don't look like me and you really want to fight for racism, you go fight it at your kitchen table with your daddy and your granddaddy and the ones that's really blocking it, right? That's what I see as blocking racism. Not you standing over next to me trying to make yourself look like an idol, like you're here with me. So that's where I come from it. So the people that were originally with the Niagara movement were the people that I would have considered the NAACP. When it got rotated over and other people came in and money, the influx of money came within a 45-day period, that told me right there that the control was being, because what I noticed is that Black people as a whole, we like money. Money matters to us. When it comes to people that don't look like us, they like power. They like situations based. We want to control things. They want to control situations. And the NAACP and the movement of Black people became a situation that needed to be controlled. And the ones that couldn't be controlled got assassinated.
And that's real. And that's real. And
get a hand clap.
That's real. That's real. And I think just to wrap that part up, I think that similarly, me and you have very similar approaches when it comes to coalition and collaboration with others. And I tell folks all the time that this organization is not a fully Black organization. Like, we can't say that because it's always been multiracial, multi-ethnic. However, this organization is deeply rooted in the African-American culture and the African-American experience. So if you are going to be a part of this organization, and I don't care what you look like, if you don't look like me, right? Making sure that you understand that you are coming into this organization and you got to do the work, right? This isn't an opportunity for you to, as I think we mentioned earlier, right? This isn't popcorn activism mode. This isn't a photo op for you to have your fist raised, right? You have to be committed to actually getting your hands dirty, boots on the ground, doing the work. So, just to kind of show that, like, I think specifically with the younger generation, our goal is pushing the organization forward, recognizing a lot of the turmoil, disconnections that have happened historically in the past, to make sure that we are really fulfilling the mission and the vision of the founding, to make sure that we are working effortlessly to address and to disseminate race-based discrimination. So thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. We are talking to Tyleek Chambers, president of the Virginia State NAACP Youth and College Division. And so, Tyleek, what Razor was and you were just dialoguing about it is so pertinent, because we are approaching, an election season. And I think sort of a common thread between what he said and where we are now as a nation is, what is the NAACP really equipped to fight, right? Who does it truly answer to? Like, does it answer to the people, or do we get to a certain stage to where, whether political or otherwise, to where it's like, ooh, like, we can't touch that because we may lose money, or we may feel too threatened, you know what I mean? Because we see people's well-being, their jobs, their organizations being threatened literally by our federal government nowadays. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, what are we really equipped to fight in this day and time, particularly leading into this election season?
Absolutely. And I can speak definitely when it comes to the Virginia State Conference of the NAACP. We recognize, specifically for the Commonwealth of Virginia, that this time period, this election, this gubernatorial race is vitally important, right? So as I mentioned earlier, like, our key themes are education, litigation, agitation, right? And we want to make sure that we educate all Virginianers about the importance of this gubernatorial election, as well as their local elections, so that way they are able to make the necessary decisions and choices to positively impact their communities. And I always have to say this, right? The NAACP, we are a nonpartisan organization, but to quote my president and CEO, Mr. Derek Johnson, we are nonpartisan, but we are political as F, right? So again, making sure that we are talking about what the policies are, right? What these people stand for, right? And making sure that we are presenting that information in a way that's digestible to people. And also so that, Virginianers, as well as those throughout the nation, understand that their vote does have a direct impact. We saw that in this last presidential election. Folks really thought that their votes weren't going to matter, or didn't decide to come out for whatever reasons, right? And then we see how that went, right? And we see the current state of the nation as it is now. As you said, public education is being attacked, right? People's livelihoods are being attacked. And I'm always reminded that throughout the history of this nation, those who chose to utilize their voices, those who chose to stand up and be a part of organizations like the NAACP, as Razor said, right, they faced like life-threatening, like livelihood, like their lives were literally taken, right? So I don't take my involvement, as well as the expectation I set for others, right, lightly. However, I think as a Commonwealth moving into the future, and as a young person myself, specifically wanting to embolden my fellow peers and those in that kind of 18 to 25 age range to make sure that they do exercise their right to vote, because their vote can be the difference between a Virginia that pushes forward, that creates more opportunities, that stands up against, tyranny, not to quote the Sic Semper's Tyrannus, right? But making sure that we are, as Virginianers, continuing to uphold those standards, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? Or a Virginia that bows to tyranny, that does not engage with the people and the will of the people, who rather as was mentioned earlier, right, has personal interest. So I think the NAACP, I can speak for the state conference, we adhere to the will of the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And our goal is to make sure that we are educating our members, we are educating, college chapters and youth councils across the Commonwealth to be able to engage in their local communities, but more importantly, not just to focus on this gubernatorial race that we have, but to make sure that they are staying connected as to what is happening locally within their local elections. So whether that's sheriff, their mayor, school board, city council, what have you, superintendents, making sure that they are tapped in to make sure that whomever that they choose to vote for, right, it has the best interests of their community and their people. So I think the organization has always been equipped with those resources and that information. I think it is a task of us as young people to carry that forward and make sure that we are engaging with our peers, because there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation that we have to combat against.
Yeah, and that's what it boils down to. It's like any naysayer or any rumor that may come up about it. It starts with the people. Yeah, the organization is a shell.
It is.
The action of the people. And something that you said stands out to me is, I don't know if we're built. The old saying, they don't make them like they used to. Like, those are the people that we really need in these leadership positions, because the people that you referenced a minute ago were literally willing to risk it all. Yeah, like they literally knew that their livelihood and future generations depended on them fighting against the system at hand. And Negroes may be too comfortable now, Tali. I'm being 100. Like some of us think we got it going on, think that we got this job, think that certain people like us, and so that makes us more important than other brothers and sisters. And I don't know if we really willing to risk it the way our forefathers knew that they had to.
And can I also provide a little context of the importance of like youth activism, as I said earlier, right? Even in that era, right? If we look at those folks, like even the folks that I mentioned who were, again, putting their lives on the line, engaging, right? Majority of those were youth. Right. Yeah. The foot soldiers of the civil rights era were youth, because they knew their parents couldn't go out and march, because if they did, they lost their jobs. Right. Or their parents could face, different forms of brutalities. Right. Lynchings were still heavily throughout the nation. Right. The youth were the ones who chose to come together, build collaboration amongst themselves, and made the decision to go and march and go and be a part of these protests to make sure that future generations will not have to suffer through Jim Crow or segregation. So I think in the similar vein, I have the privilege and the honor of being a part of that legacy of youth activism, and recognizing that in this day and age, our fights do look different. Yeah. But that same passion, that same goal, that same desire to make sure that we leave a better Commonwealth or a better nation for future generations is still present. And I think that's the part of why the Youth and College Division of the NAACP is so important, because you develop that leadership and it allows us the opportunity to mobilize and speak and fight for things that we want to see and things that we believe in, so that hopefully by the time that we're adults, like we're OGs in this. Like we know what's up.
Let me ask you a quick question, because sometimes I do feel like individuals also don't know what things they could potentially go to the NAACP for assistance with, or advocacy for, and you may or may not be aware of this situation, but apparently, as I've heard it, the Western Albemarle High School, a decision was made to allow representative of TPUSA to come and talk to their students. For those who opt in, of course. And then apparently a school board member spoken out against that, referred to this organization or draw a parallel between this organization and that of the KKK, and is facing backlash because of that. And so I'm wondering, for the parents or students who disagree with this, and I believe the basis is that there's a comparable club at that school, which is the reason why they feel like they ought to be able to bring something like this in as well. But is that something that people could to talk to the NAACP about, if they feel like they may be, I don't know, discriminated against, or just have the simple question about how do I combat this?
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to what I had mentioned earlier when it comes to folks often know what the issue is. So like you laid out like what the issue is, or what the uncomfortability is. But when it comes to, well, how do I address it? Like, what does that look like? Is it just collectively getting together and doing a march the day of? And it's like, that may not be the best foot forward. Right. And I think that is why, for me personally, my desire is to aid the local branch here in revitalizing the youth council. So that way those type of concerns can be something that's brought up to our youth council. Right. And then our youth council members can be able to say, hey, this is what's happening in Western Albemarle. How can we mobilize and utilize this organization and our access to over 117 years of activism and community organizing to address it, be present for our community, but more importantly, to educate folks that may not be aware of that. So absolutely. And I would definitely say for those like who, you know, have those type of questions, to definitely reach out to us within the NAACP Virginia State Conference Youth and College Division. And we can certainly strategize with them, because we want to make sure that those who are impacted by it are the ones that are at the forefront. It's not a Virginia State Conference thing. It's their fight. We're just here to support and uplift it.
I understand.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. And then closing, because this has been a rich conversation. Razor Max, thank y'all for joining me with chatting with this brilliant young brother. Keep up the great work, man. But in closing, the president, like I said, somebody I admire. I see the work that I see him doing. President Derrick Johnson of National NAACP, he was quoted as saying the NAACP will continue to advocate for policies that dismantle systemic injustices and strive to improve the lives of the Black people and all Americans. So shouts out there. But Talik, if you haven't said enough, make sure the people know how to reach you.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, feel free to follow me on socials. My social media is King_Chambers at 310. I got to look up our state conference one because it changes a lot. And if you want to stay in touch with the Virginia State Conference Youth and College Division, you can follow us on IG or all social media platforms. Our social media is VANAACP_YCD. Again, VANAACP_YCD. And if folks are interested in the local Charlottesville Albemarle community, and being a part of the Charlottesville Albemarle Youth Council, feel free to reach out as well. We have planned coming up a interest meeting for any youth or parents or guardians to learn a little bit more about the Youth and College Division. So definitely reach out and we'll send that information out to y'all. And I just want to thank y'all so much for having me on.
Welcome. Continue blessings, brother.
For sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.